It's Miss Teri from the Carnegie, and welcome to Adventure Storytime, where we tell stories that have adventure. So today we are going to read an older story. It's called My Father's Dragon, and it is by a lady called Ruth Stiles Gannett. And what's interesting about this story is that she wrote it, but her stepmother actually did the drawings in this book. And they're actually quite good. And they use a process called pointillism, which means that she did all these little tiny dots to do the shading in the drawings. And this book is actually still sold today, but it was written, I think, in the 1920s. So it's a very old book, but it's still really cute. And without further ado, I'm going to read it. My Father's Dragon. Chapter 1, and I'll show you guys the pictures. My father meets the cat, so it's kind of about her dad, or she puts her dad in it, but it's not a true story. One cold rainy day when my father was a little boy, he met an old alley cat on his street. The cat was very drippy and uncomfortable. So my father said, "Wouldn't you like to come home with me?" This surprised the cat. She had never before met anyone who cared about old alley cats. But she said, "I'd be very much obliged if I could sit by a warm furnace and perhaps have a saucer of milk." "We have a very nice furnace to sit by," said my father, "and I'm sure my mother has an extra saucer of milk." My father and the cat became good friends, but my father's mother was very upset about the cat. She hated cats, particularly ugly old alley cats. And there's him and her mother and the cat. "Elmer Elevator," she said to my father, because that's his name. "If you think I'm going to give that cat a saucer of milk, you're very wrong. Once you start feeding stray alley cats, you might as well expect to feed every stray in town. And I am not going to do it." This made my father very sad, and he apologized to the cat because his mother had been so rude. He told the cat to stay anyway, and that somehow he would bring her a saucer of milk every day. My father fed the cat for 3 weeks, but one day his mother found the cat's saucer in the cellar, and she was extremely angry. She whipped my father and threw the cat out the door. But later on, my father sneaked out and found the cat. Together, they went for a walk in the park and tried to think of nice things to talk about. My father said, "When I grow up, I'm going to have an airplane. Wouldn't it be wonderful to fly just anywhere you might think of?" "Would you like to fly very, very much?" asked the cat. "I certainly would. I'd do anything if I could fly." And there they are walking through the park. "Well," said the cat, "if you'd really like to fly that much, I think I know of a sort of a way you might get to fly while you're still a little boy." "You mean you know where I could get an airplane?" "Well, not exactly an airplane, but something even better. As you can see, I'm an old cat now, but in my younger days, I was quite a traveler. My traveling days are over, but last spring I took just one more trip and sailed to the island of Tangerina, stopping at the port of Cranberry. Well, it just so happened that I missed the boat, and while waiting for the next, I thought I'd look around a bit. I was particularly interested in a place called Wild Island, which we had passed on our way to Tangerina. Wild Island and Tangerina are joined together by a long string of rocks. But people never go to Wild Island. because it's mostly jungle and inhabited by very wild animals. So I decided to go across the rocks and explore it for myself. It certainly is an interesting place, but I saw something there that made me want to weep. And there's Wild Island. Wow, I don't know if I'd want to go to Wild Island. That sounds kind of scary. Chapter 2, My Father Runs Away. Wild Island is practically cut in two by a very wide and muddy river, continued the cat. This river begins near one end of the island and flows into the ocean at the other. The animals there are very lazy, and they used to hate having to go all the way around the beginning of this river to get to the other side. It made visiting inconvenient and mail deliveries slow, particularly at the Christmas rush. Crocodiles could have carried passengers and mail across the river, but they are very moody and not very dependable, and they're always looking for something to eat. They don't care if the animals have to walk around the river. But what does all of this have to do with airplanes, said my father, who thought the cat was taking awfully long to explain. Be patient, Elmer, said the cat, and he went on with the story. One day, about 4 months before I arrived on Wild Island, a baby dragon fell from a low flying cloud. He was too young to fly very well, and he had bruised one wing quite badly, so he couldn't get back up to his cloud. The animals found him soon, and everybody said, "Why, this is just exactly what we've needed all these years." They tied a big rope around his neck and waited for the wing to get well. This was going to end all their crossing the river troubles. "I've never seen a dragon," said my father. "Did you see him? How big is he?" "Oh, yes, indeed, I saw the dragon. In fact, we became great friends," said the cat. "I used to hide in the bushes and talk to him. He's not a very big dragon, about the size of a large bear, although I imagine he's grown quite large since I've left. He's got a long tail and yellow and blue stripes. His horn and eyes and the bottom of his feet are bright red, and he has gold-colored wings." "Oh, how wonderful," said my father. "What did the animals do with them?" "They started training him to carry passengers, and even though he's just a baby dragon, they worked him all day and all night. They made him carry loads that are much too heavy, and if he complains, they twist his wings." Oh no, that sounds horrible. He was always tied to a stake on a rope, just long enough to go across the river, but no further. His only friends are the crocodiles, who say hello to him once a week. Really, he's the most miserable animal I've ever come across, and I promised that I'd try to help him someday, although I don't know how. The rope around his neck is about the biggest, toughest rope you can imagine. Anyway, when you were talking about airplanes, you gave me a good idea. Now I'm quite sure that if you're able to rescue the dragon, which wouldn't be the least bit easy, he'd let you ride him most anywhere, provided you were nice to him, of course. "Oh, I'd love to," said my father, and he was so angry at his mother for being rude to the cat, he didn't feel the least bit sad about running away from home for a while. That very afternoon, my father and the cat went down to the docks to see about ships going to the island of Tangerina. They found out that a ship would be sailing the next week, so right away they started planning for the rescue of the dragon. Everything had to be kept secret, so when they found or bought anything to take on the trip, they hid it behind a rock in the park. The night before my father sailed, he borrowed his father's knapsack, and he and the cat packed everything very carefully. " He put everything into a sack labeled cranberry, some clean clothes and enough food to last my father while he was on the ship. He couldn't live on mice, so he took 25 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and 6 apples, because that's all the apples he could find in the pantry. When everything was packed, my father and the cat went down to the docks to the ship. A night watchman was on duty, so while the cat made loud noises to distract him, my father ran over and jumped onto the ship. He went down into the hold and hid among some bags of wheat. The ship sailed early the next morning. And here's a picture of it, the ship sailing and the cat staying behind. So now he's on his way. So he ends up making it all the way to Tangerina, where he encounters many, many animals, such as a rhinoceros, tigers, a lion, a gorilla. And then you'll never guess what he meets. Let's see what he meets. Our next chapter is My Father Makes a Bridge. My father walked back and forth along the bank trying to think of some way to cross the river. So he's on the island and he comes to a river. He's met all those animals. He's lost all his things because he's given it to the animals, and he comes to a river. He's trying to think some way to cross the river. He found a high flagpole with a rope going over to the other side. The rope went through a loop at the top of the pole and then down the pole and around a large crank. A sign on the crank said, "To summon the dragon, yank the crank, report disorderly conduct to gorilla." From what the cat had told my father, he knew that the other end of the rope was tied around the dragon's neck, and he felt sorrier than ever for the poor dragon. If he were on this side, the gorilla would twist his wings until it hurt so much that he'd have to fly to the other side. If he were on the other side, the gorilla would crank the rope until the dragon would either choke or fly back to this side. What a life for a baby dragon. My father knew that if he called to the dragon to come across the river, the gorilla would surely hear him. So he thought about climbing the pole and going across on the rope. The pole was very high, and even if he could get to the top without being seen, he'd have to go all the way across hand over hand. The river was very muddy, with all sorts of unfriendly things that might live in it, but my father could think of no other way to get across. He was about to start up the pole when, despite all the noise the monkeys were making, he heard a loud splash behind him. He looked all around, but it was dusk now and he couldn't see anything there. "It's me, Crocodile," said a voice to the left. "The water's lovely, and I have such a craving for something sweet. Won't you come in for a swim?" A pale moon came out from behind the clouds, and my father could see where the voice was coming from. The crocodile's head was just peeping out of the water. Oh my goodness. He looks like he could eat a big, even a dragon. I hope he doesn't go into the water. "Oh, no, thank you," said my father. "I never swim after sundown, but I do have something sweet to offer you. Perhaps you'd like a lollipop, and perhaps you have friends who would like lollipops too." "Lollipops?" said the crocodile. "Why, that is a treat. How about it, boys?" A whole chorus of voices shouted, "Hurrah! Lollipops! Yay!" And my father counted as many as 17 crocodiles with their heads just peeping out of the water. "That's fine," said my father as he got out the 24 pink lollipops and the rubber bands. "I'll stick one here in the bank. Lollipops last longer if you keep them out of the water, you know. Now one of you can have this one. The crocodile who had first spoken swam up and tasted it. "Delicious, mighty delicious," he said. "Now, if you don't mind," said my father, "I'll just walk along your back and fasten another lollipop to the tip of your tail with a rubber band. You don't mind, do you?" So there he is with all those crocodiles. That looks pretty scary. "Oh no, not in the least," said the crocodile. "Can you get your tail out of the water just a bit?" asked my father. "Yes, of course," said the crocodile, and he lifted up his tail. Then my father ran along his back and fastened another lollipop with a rubber band. "Who's next?" said my father, and a second crocodile swam up and began sucking on that lollipop. "Now you gentlemen can save a lot of time if you just line up across the river," said my father, "and I'll be along to give you each a lollipop." So the crocodiles lined up right across the river with their tails in the air, waiting for my father to fasten on the rest of the lollipops. The tail of the 17th crocodile just reached the other bank. Wow, he made it all the way across the river on the tails of the crocodiles using lollipops. That's very smart. My father finds the dragon, chapter 10. When my father was crossing the back of the 15th crocodile with 2 more lollipops to go, the noise of the monkeys suddenly stopped, and he could hear a much bigger noise, getting louder every second. Then he could hear 7 furious tigers and 1 raging rhinoceros, 2 seething lions and 1 ranting gorilla, along with countless screeching monkeys, led by 2 extremely irate wild boars, all yelling, "It's a trick! It's a trick! There's an invasion and it must be after our dragon! Kill it! Kill it!" The whole crowd stampeded down the bank. As my father was fixing the 17th lollipop for the last crocodile, he heard a wild boar scream, "Look, it came this way! It's over there now, see? The crocodiles made a bridge for it." And just as my father leapt onto the other bank, one of the wild boars jumped onto the back of the first crocodile. My father didn't have a moment to spare. By now, the dragon realized that my father was coming to rescue him. He ran out of the bushes and jumped up and down, yelling, "Here I am! I'm right here! Can you see me? Hurry, the boar is coming over on the crocodiles too. They're all coming over. Oh, please, hurry, hurry." The noise was simply terrific. My father ran up to the dragon and took out his very sharp jackknife. "Steady, old boy, steady. We'll make it. Just stand still," he told the dragon as he began sawing through the big rope. By this time, both boars, all 7 tigers, the 2 lions, the rhinoceros, the gorilla, along with the countless screeching monkeys, were all on their way across the crocodiles, and there was still a lot of rope to cut through. "Oh, hurry!" the dragon kept saying, and my father again told him to stand still. If I don't think I can make it," said my father, "we'll fly over to the other side of the river and I can finish cutting the rope there." And there is a beautiful dragon. Look at all his stripes. Suddenly, the screaming grew louder and madder, and my father thought the animals must have crossed the river. He looked around and saw something which surprised and delighted him, partly because he had finished his lollipop, and partly because, as I told you before, crocodiles are very moody and not the least bit dependable and are always looking for something to eat. The first crocodile had turned away from the bank and started swimming down the river. The second crocodile hadn't finished yet, so he followed right after the first, still sucking his lollipop. All the rest did the same thing, one right after the other, until they were all swimming away in a line. The 2 wild boars, the 7 tigers, the rhinoceroses, the 2 lions, the gorilla, along with the countless screeching monkeys, were all riding down the middle of the river on the train of crocodiles sucking pink lollipops, and all yelling and screaming and getting their feet wet. My father and the dragon laughed themselves weak because it was such a silly sight. As soon as they had recovered, my father finished cutting the rope and the dragon raced around in circles and tried to do a somersault. A dragon doing a somersault? That is silly. He was the most excited baby dragon that ever lived. My father was in a hurry to fly away, and when the dragon finally calmed down a bit, my father climbed onto his back. "All aboard," said the dragon. "Where shall we go?" "We'll spend the night on the beach, and tomorrow we'll start on the long journey home." "So it's off to the shores of Tangerina," shouted my father as the dragon soared above the dark jungle and the muddy river, and all the animals bellowing at them, and all the crocodiles licking pink lollipops and grinning wide grins. After all, what did the crocodiles care about a way to cross the river? And what a fine feast they were carrying on their backs. And as my father and the dragon passed over the ocean rocks, they heard a tiny, excited voice scream, "Bum-cack, bum-cack. We dreed our naggin, we need our dragon." And there they are, riding on the backs of the dragon, or backs of the crocodiles, because they got stuck. And the crocodiles with their lollipops going down the river. But my father and the dragon knew that nothing in the world would ever make them go back to Wild Island. The end. Wow, that was a good adventure story. And he had a good adventure going to an island on a ship and finding all those animals and tricking them, and then getting across the river by tricking the crocodiles, and then tricking the crocodiles again, really, to go down the river and taking the animals with them, and then freeing the dragon and being able to ride the dragon all the way home. Wow, that's an awesome story and an awesome adventure. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our adventure story time, and I hope that during the summer and the rest of the year that you're able to find your own adventures, and maybe you can tell me about a couple on our webpage. So you guys have a good rest of the day and a good rest of the summer. Bye.